I think there are two things you have to think about when you start thinking about domestic violence. The first is at the macro level, it does need to be considered as a crime and addressed as that, and taken to be a totally unacceptable behaviour. But at the micro level, at the personal level, we need to address the individual needs involved.
Domestic violence, I think, particularly in Australia, is a lot wider than is generally reported to the public. And the problem is that most of what the public accepts as domestic violence is only the physical side. It doesn't involve the emotional or the psychological side.
For the family who lives with abuse, there's a lot of research that indicates that not only do the children grow up thinking that they can use violence as an acceptable form to have their needs met, but they also have a lot of ingrained trauma symptoms that they live with. Research has shown living in abusive relationships is similar to living in a war zone. So of course you get all the physiological and behavioural issues that go along with those types of experiences.
I accept that there is a fairly widespread abuse by younger people of some of their parents, particularly where perhaps the children have grown up in separated families and with a single parent. But I think a lot of this depends on how they grew up initially. If the family separated as a result of domestic violence, and that occurred when these people were quite young, then that becomes a norm for them to get what they want.
So I think what my research highlighted is there is commonality across England and Australia in the types of experiences secondary victims of homicide have, and that there is a lot of support offered. What's new in my research that hasn't been looked at previously is where that support comes from and how helpful it is perceived to be by the people who've lost someone through homicide. So, Angel Hands is an organisation that was established to assist people who were affected by crime, and not just the immediate victim but those people around them, because as we said, it is pervasive to experience crime, not only in domestic violence but in sexual assault. It affects all the family members, around them. So a lot of people were asking for support, and they wanted to meet other people who'd been through similar experiences or know where services were. So Angel Hands was established in response to a need.
I think the law in Western Australia, as it's currently drafted with all the amendments, is probably one of the best in the world. I've had an opportunity to read domestic violence laws in a number of other Western civilised countries. I think we have by far the best domestic violence laws. The problem is with enforcement. There is only a certain amount that the police can do to enforce them, for a number of reasons. A, they're undermined. Understaffed as far as being able to enforce them. And secondly, there is only a certain amount they can do. They can certainly tell a person that you're not to attend. It's an offence to talk to this person, speak to them on the phone, go anywhere near them, but they can't be sitting on that person 24 hours a day. They don't have the resources. I think the other thing that would eventually improve the enforcement, albeit that it will be very expensive from a public point of view, is to have a separate domestic violence force as a separate unit within the police force that concentrated solely on that. As the state president of the Royal Association of Justices, I was responsible for putting together conferences and training sessions. When the Domestic Violence Act was brought in, which was written by Stephen Heath, who's now the Chief Magistrate, he was the primary, and we needed to talk to someone or have someone provide a lecture that would give presiding justices an insight into exactly what domestic violence was. One of the problems I have is that I believe, and I've always cross swords, I suppose, with academics on this, that I believe you can learn so much from a book. But in order to really understand what's going on, you need to have someone that's been involved. And when you look at Anne's background, 15 years ago, she was asleep in bed when her estranged husband broke in and used a gun, which killed her two young children, Letitia and Talia, I think the other one was. And Anne survived. She's not only been involved, but she understands the natures of the problem and the problems that people have to deal with when they try to get over this. And when you look at Anne today, I mean, she's very attractive, she's vivacious, very, very strong-willed woman who's probably the best advocate and the best person you could ever talk to about domestic violence and its implications for everybody, not just the family itself, but the wider group.
The first part of preventing domestic violence is actually saying that abuse is never okay, and every single community member needs to make that a really clear line in the sand, that it's never okay to be violent or abusive to another human being, especially not one in a trusted relationship. We're lucky in Western Australia, our laws recently changed to reflect that when you're in a trusting relationship and you breach that trust and violate or abuse, someone within a trusted relationship, it's actually grounds for aggravation. I think that's a real indication of that is what the whole community should be saying. It's like it's not okay because it's a family member or because it's your partner. It actually is even more not okay because it's somebody you love doing it to you. I think that's the first step. And the second step is actually role modelling what it is that we would like our children to be growing up and how they should behave in relationships. I think that we're lacking strongly in role models. And if you take the quote that a picture paints 1,000 words, and most people accept that that's quite true. We can all look at a picture and go, yes, that tells us so much. Well, role modelling is worth 1,000 lessons. So if we role model how we should be in loving, nurturing, giving relationships that are healthy, and we say they are the only types of relationships our children have to have, they shouldn't have to be in abusive relationships. They shouldn't have to see people who have abused or hurt them.
We've been friends ever since, and we try to work together where possible. We do work on different areas, but certainly we do. I think she has so much to offer people that have been involved or been victims of domestic violence, and I now know that she's putting together a group of people that are domestic violence victims, so that they will have a voice within the Western Australian area. It's something that hasn't been done before, and it's only something I think that somebody like Anne could do, could get these people together and to move them into that direction.
I think it's really important that the community listens both to what's being said and what isn't being said when it comes to domestic violence, and often the silences will say so much, the things that aren't being said. So I think first of all, listening is important, both to the spoken word and the silences, and really responding to calls for help, not just from victims, but also from offenders, because a lot of offenders don't want to use the behaviours they're using, but they don't know an alternative path. So I think it's up to each of us, and that's why I say at the macro level it needs that criminal response, but at the micro level, if you know somebody who's being abusive and who is on the wrong path, help them to find alternative ways to have their needs met without using abuse. And it may not be that you know the answers, but help them to find the people who can. And I think that works both with victims and offenders. Nobody expects the general public to find the solution, but help identify the people who can help find the solution.